Okay guys, so this is going to be solving simple trig equations, and we're going to be using the trig chart for all of these example problems. So the first section says identify the quadrant where theta lies. Okay, so this says sine of theta is less than 0, which it means it's negative. So sine is negative in quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Tangent is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. So we circle the answer that they have in common, and that's all there is to this section. Cosine is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. Cosecant is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 because cosecant goes with sine. So they're both positive in quadrant 1. Tangent is negative in quadrant 2 and quadrant 4. Secant is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. Remember, secant's going to go with cosine. So quadrant 4 is going to be your answer there. Secant is negative in quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. Remember, secant goes with cosine. And then sine is going to be greater than 0 in 1 and 2. So they have quadrant 2 in common. So make sure whenever we're answering these questions, you do it just like this. There's nothing more to it. Okay, don't make it difficult. Make sure you use your all strippers take cash. Okay, now going back to our little chart that we've made. This is what we're going to be using for the next few lessons. So this is alpha. This is 180 minus alpha. This is pi minus alpha. This is 180 plus alpha. And this is pi plus alpha. 360 minus alpha. And then we're going to be 2 pi minus alpha. Now, we're going to be using this whenever we solve trig equations. So it's pretty much the reverse of whenever we, our four-step process when we evaluated trig functions. We drew the angle, found the reference angle, trig chart, then ASTC. This pretty much only has 3 steps because we're not going to draw any angles, okay? So your first step. So make sure you know if you're going to be in degrees and radians. Like I've always said, calculus is always going to be in radians. So we're not going to use a lot of degrees, but it's good to know. Okay, first one. So sine of theta is equal to a negative square root of 3 over 2. So first step we're going to do is ask ourselves, where is sine negative? Okay, so sine's negative in quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Now I'm going to go to my trig chart. And we know about inverse trig already, so that's pretty much what we're going to be doing. So we're going to ask ourselves, where is sine equal to square root of 3 over 2? And we're going to be in degrees, so it's going to be 60 degrees. So our reference angle is 60 degrees. Now I'm going to apply these formulas up here. So quadrant 3 answer is going to be 180 plus 60. And so you get 240. And then quadrant 4 answer is going to be 360 minus 60, which is 300 degrees. Okay, and that's it. You usually get 2 answers for this. Anytime we have to do plus or minus, you'll have all 4 quadrant answers. And there's not much to it. Okay, cotangent of theta is equal to square root of 3. Okay, so cotangent's positive in quadrant 1, quadrant 3. And if you want to add your ASTC up there to look at, that's fine with me. Okay, so cotangent's positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. Our second step is to get our reference angle. So if we go to our trig chart, cotangent is equal to square root of 3 at pi over 6 radians. Okay? So our reference angle is pi over 6. Quadrant 1 answer is alpha, which is just pi over 6. Quadrant 3 answer is going to be pi plus pi over 6. Now we're going to do around the world. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So this is 7 pi over 6. Okay, cosine of theta is equal to a negative 1. Cosine is negative in quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. Okay, we go to our trig chart. Cosine is equal to 1. at 0. Okay, and we're in degrees. And the quadrant 2 answer is going to be 180 minus 0 and 180 plus 0 for quadrant 3. So we only have one answer on this. It's 180 degrees. You don't have to write it twice. Okay, and that makes sense because if I was to draw my angle, I'd land at 180 degrees right here. The x coordinate is -1, and I land on the negative x-axis. Okay, so when we're doing these questions, you look at the signs first. Okay, that determines your quadrants. You get your reference angle from your trig chart, and then you apply your formulas. Okay, on to the next example. So cosine of theta is equal to square root of 3 over 2. Cosine is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. Your reference angle, your alpha, is going to be, should be pi over 6. We get that from our trig chart. Right here, pi over 6. And then your reference angle is quadrant 1, so its alpha is pi over 6. And your quadrant 4 answer is going to be 2 pi minus pi over 6. So we're going to do around the world. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 minus 1 is 11. So this is 11 pi over 6. Sine of theta is equal to a negative square root of 2 over 2. Sine is negative in quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Your reference angle is going to be 45 degrees. Sine is equal to square root of 2 over 2 at 45 degrees. Quadrant 3 answer is going to be 180 plus 45 degrees. And quadrant 4 answer is 360 minus 45 degrees. So it's 225 and 315. Next question, where's tangent equal to 1? Tangent's positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. Reference angle is 45 degrees. Quadrant 1 answer is 45 degrees. Quadrant 3 answer is going to be 180 plus 45 degrees, which is 225 degrees. Okay? Secant of theta is equal to square root of 2 radians. Okay? So secant's positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. Remember, secant's going to go with cosine. Your reference angle is going to be pi over 4 radians. So we go to our trig chart. Secant is equal to square root of 2 at pi over 4. Okay, so a quadrant 1 answer is pi over 4. Quadrant 4 answer is going to be 2 pi minus pi over 4. We do around the world. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 minus 1 is 7, so it's 7 pi over 4. Okay, cosecant of theta is equal to a negative 2. Cosecant goes with sine, and it's negative in quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. So our reference angle is going to be, let's see, so it's going to be 30 degrees. We get that from our trig chart. Okay, so cosecant is equal to 2 at 30 degrees. Quadrant 3 answer is 180 plus 30 degrees. Okay, and quadrant 4 answer is going to be 360 minus 30 degrees is 330 degrees. Okay, last example problem for this section. Cotangent is equal to square root of 3 over 3, and we're going to be in radians. So cotangent's positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. Your reference angle is going to be, should be pi over 3. Cotangent, yeah, it's pi over 3. Okay, so quadrant 1 answer is pi over 3. Quadrant 3 answer is pi plus pi over 3. We're going to do around the world. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, so this is 4 pi over 3. Now, so this has been solving simple trig equations. You need to do the homework that goes with this section, and we're going to get into a little more complicated trig functions, but we want to start off nice and easy. Thanks, and have a good afternoon.